About 10 a.m., Warren decided that warning had to be given to Samuel Adams and John Hancock, who were wanted by the British authorities and were likely candidates for the gallows to be hung.
Mm-hmm.
A young shoemaker, William Dawes, sent by the land route, and in assurance against Dawes' capture, Revere took the water route out of Boston. But his efforts almost failed because Revere forgotten to put cloth rags to muffle the sound of the oars as he was passing across the Charles. Any noise created a risk that he would be captured because he had to pass the Somerset, was the man of war, the big British ship there.
Mm-hmm.
So see, he had to try to muffle the sound of the oars as he oared across the Charles. He wasn't trying to draw attention to himself, was he?
Nope.
He was trying to be as sneaky and inconspicuous as possible.
This was a covert operation,
Absolutely.
which was necessary back in that day.
The last thing he wanted to do was attract any attention of the British soldiers or notify them of anything at this point. Before the trio could cover the 5 miles between Lexington and Concord, they encountered roadblocks manned by British redcoats. Responding to the urgency of the moment, they proceeded to break through. Prescott used his knowledge of the countryside to advance successfully and elude capture. He was the only one of the 3 to complete the journey and deliver the alarm to Concord. Dawes initially appeared to have escaped his pursuers, but was thrown from his horse and captured. Revere was taken prisoner, and during his interrogation deliberately provided greatly inflated numbers of militiamen awaiting for the British in Concord. During the ride back to Lexington, Revere and his captors heard shots fired and church bells ring throughout the area. Fearing their safety, the British released Revere and took precautions, giving him a tired horse for a slow ride back to Lexington. So there you go. That is the accurate historic telling of what happened to Paul Revere in his ride that night, April 1775. Now, with listening to that and knowing that he was trying to be as sneaky and quiet and not drawing attention to himself as possible, let's listen to Sarah Palin and her explanation of what happened and what was the intent of Paul Revere
In his midnight ride.
Pardon me. He was trying to get to the leaders of the militia and of the patriots to warn them, especially John Hancock and Adams, because they were being hunted by the British, and they would have been hung as traitors. So he wanted to go warn them. He didn't. If he was attracting attention to himself on the way on his ride, that would defeat the purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's listen to Dippy from Alaska and her explanation of Paul Revere's ride as she visited in Massachusetts the Old North Church.
He who warned the British that they weren't going to be taking away our arms by ringing those bells and making sure as he's riding his horse through town to send those warning shots and bells that we were going to be secure and we were going to be free.
There you go. There is Dippy from Alaska saying that as he was riding through the streets, he was yelling and warning and firing shots, and while he was also ringing the bell up in the church mic. I like to see how
That's multi-talented.
Yeah, maybe he was shooting his gun at the bell. Bing, 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 bing. So he was a great shot as he was riding down the street. He was shooting his gun and ringing the bell with a bullet. Ping, bing. And he was warning, the whole purpose was to warn the British that, hey, we're badasses. You're not going to take our guns away from us. You hear? You get that, homies? That wasn't his intent. I just read the history. His intent was to be as sneaky as possible. And he didn't ride through the streets saying the British are coming. He was quiet. In fact, he rode his way across the Charles, and on his way he forgot to wrap the oars with cloth, which he was supposed to do to make sure the oars didn't make a lot of noise because he didn't want to attract the attention of the British. His whole intent was to be a sneaky messenger to get by the British without any attention and warn the Patriots, particularly Adams and Hancock, because they were the ones who were going to be hung if they were caught, that the British were coming. It was only after he was captured as a prisoner of the British that he started saying, well, there's a lot of militia waiting for you, and kind of scared them, and they released him. But that wasn't his intent as he was riding through town. It was to be sneaky. It was to elude the British. She got it 100% backwards because she did not know history. She does not know history. She made it up. She was put on the spot. And my guess is her handlers weren't around at that time.
No, because you know what happens when her handlers are around. You can't ask you can't ask questions like that.
And
when her handlers are around, everything is calculated to the T.
They must have had to take a pot.
Yeah.
And they left Dippy alone. And somebody asked her about, you're visiting the North Church. You know, Paul Revere was here. And then she opened her mouth and just made something up. And if you watch the video clip, you could tell she's like struggling to figure out what to say because she doesn't know. She doesn't know history. She doesn't like to read. We found that out.
God forbid if she ever if she ever had to talk about the Gettysburg Address or something.